Thank you for joining Prep for the Polls local edition. Whether you're joining us online live or you're watching this later, we hope that this will be a valuable resource for you as you prepare for upcoming local elections. We'll keep it relatively brief. Just want to go over several things that may be useful to you as you prepare to vote and talk to others in your life about preparing to vote for them as well. So YWCA Minneapolis is a nonprofit organization and we are nonpartisan. So all of the information shared today is an opportunity to give you information for your civic engagement. And we also operate from our bold mission, which is eliminating racism, empowering women and girls, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. We'll be using that as a framework for which we educate all of you, talk about voting, and talk about how to vote with an equity framework. And so just wanted to give that disclaimer at the front end that we are a resource and we're a nonpartisan organization. So there will be no information about how to vote, but a lot of information you can use to make decisions for you about voting. So first wanted to talk about what is on the ballot. So I'll be speaking predominantly about Minneapolis since we're YWCA Minneapolis, but there are some comparisons in St. Paul, our twin city in the metro area. And we're also going to be speaking about ranked choice voting, which a number of other Minnesota cities have since adopted, some for the first time this year. So on the ballot, we're going to see city offices. These are things like the mayor, city council offices for your ward, the Board of Taxation and Estimate, the Board of Estimate and Taxation. So that determines tax levies and taxation processes for Park and Rec, and Park and Recreation seats. So that'll be both at-large seats and district seats. Depending on where you live, these will look a little bit different, and I will go over that in just a moment. If you live in Minneapolis, you're also going to see 3 city questions on the ballot. So I'm going to go over briefly what these are. And again, there are ample resources out there for you to find information about this and for you to practice understanding how you're going to vote. City questions are yes or no questions that appear on a ballot that allows the electorate to help make decisions for how the city will function. So the first is a government structure question about an executive mayor and legislative council. Minneapolis is a weak mayor city. And so currently our city council has more power than the mayor in terms of some decisions, but they work collaboratively along with all of the departments in the city to make decisions for the operation of Minneapolis. This question would give certain areas, would give the mayor more power in determining things for certain areas of the city. And so it would eliminate a currently existing executive council and push some more power over to the mayoral office. The second city question is a Department of Public Safety question. There's been a lot of conversation and dialogue. You may have seen dialogue about this city question thus far. There was a question whether or not this would be on the ballot. As of now, it will be on the ballot, and you'll be able to see on a sample ballot, which I'll go over in a minute, what that language will look like. The Department of Public Safety question asks whether the city of Minneapolis ought to develop a Department of Public Safety that would be overseen by the mayor and city council and would house a number of different entities to promote public safety in the city of Minneapolis. This would be an amendment to the current city charter, which has a minimum number for peace officers in the city and other delineations of how our policing system works. And so you'll notice that the language on the question says, shall the Minneapolis city charter be amended to remove the police department and replace it with a Department of Public Safety that employs a comprehensive public health approach to the delivery of health and safety in the city? There's more to the question. There's been some confusion about whether this voting yes for this question would mean an elimination of the police department, which it would not. A creation of a public safety department may still include police. It just opens up the conversation for what we do next with our public safety. There's a lot of information that you can find, but even just looking closer at a sample ballot will help you determine, what questions you still have, where you want to find that information. And there are some other cities in the United States that have implemented public safety departments. And so there's opportunity for you to look at what that might look like in operation. The third city question authorizes the Minneapolis City Council to enact a rent control ordinance. So there's also a rent control ordinance on the ballot in St. Paul, but they already have determined that the rent control threshold would be rents shall not be raised more than 3% each year. In Minneapolis, there's no determination yet of a threshold, but answering yes to this question would mean that the Minneapolis City Charter is amended so that the City Council can enact an ordinance of that kind to put caps on rent increases within the city. So the city offices are going to be ranked choice voting, which I'll go over in a minute, and the city questions are going to be yes or no questions. There's a great resource. I'm a fan of the Secretary of State's website, and they have ample resources about elections in multiple languages for your perusal. But this URL, which will also be placed in the comments below, is where you can find exactly what your ballot is going to look like on November 2nd, or if you vote early or absentee. This is a really helpful resource because it can help you prepare and do any research that you might want to do to ensure that you're voting in line with your values and to see what questions you might have ahead of voting time. So I just printed out my ballot this morning, if you can see that, kind of. And this is helpful for me because there are several candidates for the mayor and city council seats. And so this gives me the opportunity to, ahead of time, go through, do research, talk to my neighbors, talk to community members, and figure out how I want to vote for some of these questions, but also candidates when I have multiple different opportunities to choose from and the opportunity to vote for more than one candidate, which we'll talk about in a moment. So we're going to be talking about ranked choice voting, and I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce a couple of the other members of the Racial Justice and Public Policy team to say, hey, talk about the election for a moment and give us some information that we will use as we talk about ranked choice voting next. So Angela and Anissa, do you want to hop on?
Angela Miles, Vice President of Racial Justice and Public Policy, YWC in Minneapolis. So excited to be a part of today's conversation.
Hey folks, my name is Anissa Waterhouse. I am one of the Race Equity Consulting Managers that works alongside Luna and Angela on the Racial Justice and Public Policy team.
So thanks so much for joining this public policy conversation this morning. I have just a couple of quick questions for you two that's going to inform how we talk to the community about the upcoming local election. You can answer both and in whatever order you like. But my first question is if you have a plan to vote and how you plan to engage with the upcoming metro area elections. And the second is, could you share with the audience a treat from one of your favorite person of color owned businesses in the Twin Cities Metro?
Sure, I'll start. So yes, I absolutely do plan to vote. I actually have to register to vote. And so I will be registering as a new or returning resident back to the state of Minnesota. And one of my favorite, absolutely favorite locations to partake in is the Two Scoops Ice Cream Eatery located in St. Paul. Who can be mad at ice cream?
Yum. Anissa, how about you?
Love that. So even though I am a huge procrastinator, voting is not one thing that I want to procrastinate on. So I will be voting early in this year's election. And alongside Angela's, I think what goes great with some ice cream is some cheesecake from Cheesecake Funk. My favorite place to order cheesecakes when I'm having large gatherings. My next cheesecake will be at Thanksgiving this year.
Yum. Thank you both so much. I live in Minneapolis and I really love the energy of voting same day, but I'm going to make sure that my registration is updated and correct online. And I'm a fan of Love You Cookie, which you can order online or sometimes find in a local shop. So just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to a couple members of our team. We have ample programming in the Racial Justice Department, so you might see them again soon. Angela and Anissa, thank you.
Thanks
for the opportunity, Luna. Bye, everyone.
See you soon.
Enjoy the rest of this video.
Thank you both so much. So, wanted to talk a little bit about ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is going to be what all of the city office questions will be utilizing on the ballot upcoming. So the way that ranked choice voting works is that you actually don't have to pick just one candidate. You can choose up to three. You can choose three, you can choose one. I'll explain a little bit about how this works. So why ranked choice voting is utilized is that for this process, candidates need more than 50% of the vote. So they need a majority, not just more votes than someone else. And so the first choice votes are counted to see if a majority happens naturally. If one candidate rises to the top originally, then only the first choice votes are counted. But this allows people to say, hey, my first choice is this, but I think this person would also do a good job. So if this person doesn't end up getting a majority, I'd be okay with them being in the office. And so then those votes are also counted until a majority is reached. So I'm going to use an example based on the conversation that we just had. We're not going to go into a bunch of math here because there are better videos on the Secretary of State's website, which we will link to below, that show math if you are analytic and want to see that. This is just going to be an overview of how the process works. So these are the treats that we talked about in that little conversation. Why not use a prep for the polls as an opportunity to uplift local BIPOC-owned businesses as well? So I mentioned Love You Cookie here on the left. Angela mentioned Two Scoops Ice Cream Eatery, which is here in the center. And then Anissa mentioned Cheesecake Funk, the logo's here on the right. So let's say we're voting for treats and that's what's on our ballot. If we all cast a vote for Love You Cookie, Two Scoops, or Cheesecake Funk, and none of these treats gets more than 50% of the vote, I might have voted for Love You Cookie first, Cheesecake Funk second, and Two Scoops third. So because my first choice, Love You Cookie, didn't reach 50% originally, everybody's second choice votes are going to be counted. So whatever Anissa, Angela, myself, the rest of the community put as their second choice for these treats, now those votes are going to come into the play to see if that bumps any of the treats up to be above the 50% margin. If still none of the treats have more than 50% of the vote, then we look to the third choice candidate. So the way that this operates for the ballot is that it might be that everybody puts their first choice vote, only the first choice votes are counted first, and maybe there's a clear winner at that point. But it allows a little bit more room for the community to have more say in what happens with the process if that majority is not reached. This is how this will look on the ballot. So you'll have a first, second, and third choice option to put to fill in your vote on the ballot. You cannot rank the same candidate 3 times. If you rank the same candidate 3 times, the second and third choices will be discarded. So the way that this works is if there's really only one candidate for mayor that you want, you just rank that candidate in your first choice and you leave the other 2 blank. But if you do have 2 or 3 choices, you have a first choice and then you say, well, if that person doesn't get majority, I could see another person being in line with my values. So then you rank them second and maybe you have a third or not. This is the way that this works. And so you can have 1 choice, but you also can have up to 3. And then when those are counted, the first choice votes will be counted first. And if there's no clear majority, then the process will move forward with second and third votes. So it feels a little complex, but it allows for us as voters to give more input on how, counted votes then are used towards a majority. We're going to put a link in the chat or comment section that has more information for you to see how these are counted, see how this works, watch a video that includes math if that strikes your fancy, so that you feel prepared for the upcoming vote. Wanted to go through a few important dates. So early voting has already begun in the city of Minneapolis last Friday on September 17th. So we're lucky to live in a place that allows for early voting, both absentee and in person. So there are several election sites that you can go to prior to election day on November 2nd. If that day is going to be busy for you, maybe you'll be out of town, or if you have a work schedule that makes it so that other times are going to be easier for you to be able to cast your ballot. Your ballot counts, so please find a way to cast it if you are able. September 28th is National Voter Registration Day. So if you're not registered to vote, that can be a fun day to register to vote along with people around the nation. October 12th in Minnesota is the deadline to pre-register online or on paper for the November 2nd election. However, you can still register same day if you go to vote early or if you vote on election day. So if you don't register online by October 12th and on October 13th, you're like, rats, I didn't register ahead of time. You can go to the polls on November 2nd or on one of the early vote days leading up to it and register that day. There's a bunch of information on the Secretary of State's website for what you need to bring if you're voting same day. Typically, it's an ID and proof of address or some type of proof of address. If you're already registered, you don't need to bring an ID, but usually you'll need to prove your identity and your address together, that your name and address, your current address to vote, are on the same document like a bill. All of that is outlined online. If you also have someone who can vouch for you that you live in a certain place and have for the days leading up to the election, this is how in the state of Minnesota, people who are experiencing homelessness are also able to vote. Folks can vouch for the place that they typically stay within voting areas. And if that person's a registered voter and they vouch for someone else, that vote can also be cast. And then November 2nd is election day. That's when the local election ballots will be ballot polling places will be open, and you can go in your neighborhood to your polling place to cast your vote. So a couple of other notes before we close out today. I mentioned earlier that we use our mission as a framework for thinking about civic engagement and empowering folks to have resources to participate in local elections and elections at all levels. So we wanted to give you a little bit of information about how to vote with an equity framework. So sometimes ballots can be overwhelming and it's hard to know how we can get information to ensure that we're voting in line with our values, to ensure that we're voting in a way that can promote equity and justice. So 3 tips. The first is to ground in your values. This might be just taking some time to sit with what to you it actually means to have a thriving community, what issues are really important to you when you're looking at local elections, and what you're going to be going into the polling place or when you're doing your absentee ballot, what you're going to be holding close to your heart. The second is to look for language. When you're doing your research, go to candidate websites, go to websites that have information about the questions and see what language there is. Is there language that you see that's, echoes the things that you believe strongly? Are you seeing key phrases or terms that you're on the lookout for when you want to vote with an equity framework? And the third is to ask questions. I've pasted a little piece of the Voices for Racial Justice Racial Equity Impact Assessment here. It will also be below in the comments. Voices for Racial Justice is another local organization doing work to advance racial justice in the state of Minnesota and beyond. And they've put together a pocket racial equity impact assessment that you can use for the ballot and for other decisions. But there's some questions here that can maybe help you decide what candidate or what answer you'd like to fill out. Who's most impacted? How would a proposed policy change a certain situation and for whom? How does this candidate propose that they will go about enacting policy changes? Things of this nature can all help you to vote with an equity framework when you're looking at the ballot. I see there was a question in the comments. Do I need to use all my rank options? If there is a candidate I really don't want in office, should I rank them at all? No, you don't need to use all the rank options. And if there's someone you don't want to rank, you don't need to rank them. You can just put one option if you'd like, but if you do have several you'd like to rank, you can. Let's see if I can get this to move. So our department always closes out our presentation with quotes. And so this is a quote from Marian Wright Edelman, activist, educator, and founder of the Children's Defense Fund. It says, "Democracy is not a spectator sport." Local elections are one of the most effective ways that we can create the community that we want to see right around us in our neighborhoods and in our city. And so if you are able, we encourage you to ask questions, figure out what feels exciting to you about helping to build the futures that we want to see. And also, we know that a statement like this can't be made without acknowledging that democracy is not currently open to all. And so also, we can all continue to advocate for voting rights for everyone, particularly those who have been disenfranchised from the right to vote, so that everybody has the opportunity to help build our community's futures. Thank you all today. Hopefully this video was helpful and a way to meet some other members of our team and learn about some treats that you can go check out locally. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to email pubpaul@ywcampls.org. Thanks for your time and happy voting.